Okay. And we should be recording and good to go. So take it away, Christina.
Hello, thank you so much, Sarah. My name is Christina Bagvolgi. I am in the Incentives and Planning Unit at the State Historic Preservation Office. So one of the primary programs that I administer is this Historic Homeownership and Rehabilitation Credit. So that is what I'm sort of here to share with you tonight and talk about. I do have my kids here, and my son just said, "Mommy," and I'm going to remind you that I'm doing a presentation. So ask Auntie if you need something. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully successfully, and then we'll just run through some slides. And yeah, happy to take any questions at the end. How do I make?
Looks good to me.
I have to swap them now. Do you see the presenter view?
No, just the slides.
It's always the weird way. Okay, so like I said, historic homeownership rehabilitation credit. This is a New York State tax credit program that allows you to earn a credit equal to 20% of the value of work done on your historic home. It gets directly applied to what you owe the state of New York in taxes. You go through the process with us, and then there's a claim form that you file with your taxes. If you accumulate a credit, it knocks off what you owe New York State in taxes. If your income is $60,000 or below, the credit can actually be refunded to you if it exceeds what you owe the state in taxes. So if you're above that threshold, you could just carry it forward into subsequent tax years, but otherwise you could actually have some of it come to you as a refund, not just a credit. So it's a really great way to offset the cost of doing work on your historic home, especially if there's some repairs that maybe cost a little bit more because they're, up to the preservation standards that we use. So we can use the credit. What buildings qualify? You have to pay taxes in New York State. That's the only way to take advantage of the credit. It's not like a direct rebate program. Buildings have to be listed in the state or national register of historic places. It could be an individually listed building, or it could be a building that's part of a historic district, as long as it's a contributing building to the district. That's one of those advantages for designating historic districts, is that when you open up people to this opportunity, which can be really helpful because old homes really need a lot of work. I kind of put something away. They also must be located in a qualifying census tract. So that has to do with the average median income. I'm pretty sure that all of Oneonta qualifies for that. So if you were to designate districts or landmark properties, you would meet those qualifications with the census tract. It's a very low spending threshold to be able to take advantage of the credit. You only have to spend at least $5,000 on the total of all of your work. So it's not each thing has to be $5,000. The total of all your projects have to be at least $5,000. You have to do 5% of the work on the exterior of the building. You can't claim more than $50,000 of credit in a single tax year, but that would require you to spend more than $250,000. So that's quite a high cap on that, but you could always, you have a huge amount of work to do, you could do it over several different years and claim the credit more than once. There's no limit to the number of times that you can claim the credit, as long as you qualify. The application process, it's actually quite simple. Technically, it's a three-part application according to the tax law, just because we have to certify three different things. But for the purposes of ease of applying, we combined part 1 and 2 on the same form. So part 1 is where we verify, yep, this is a historic building. That's what Sarah does, and the group of people in the Survey National Register unit, they verify that those are qualifying buildings. And then the part 2 is where you explain the work that you're going to do. Myself and my staff, we evaluate that part of the project to see, okay, is this work that qualifies? Is it appropriate? If it's fine, then you get approved and you start your work. You're supposed to apply before you start the work. That's a key part of the tax legislation for this program. There are review fees. They're not very much. The part 2 fee is only $25. The part 3 depends on what your total project cost is. So that's a sliding scale. I think the most you'd ever have to pay for the part 3 is $425. But that's if you're like doing over $200,000 of work. So the part 1 and 2 comes before you start the work. We approve it, you do your work. When you're done, you send in your part 3 explaining what work items you did, showing exactly what you spent, and then we certify that amount, and then you claim your credit that same year that we give you your certification. So if you were to go through this whole process in 2025 and close it out, you would claim the credit with your 2025 tax claim. There are so many things that can qualify for the program, which is why I love this so much. It's not just the type of work that you would think of as historic, like, oh, it doesn't have to be your old cornice or something like that. It can be just painting your house. It can be, repairing your porch, replacing your windows, even if they're appropriate windows, putting on a new roof, putting on solar panels. Sometimes I'm skipping ahead. Many things on both the exterior and the interior of your home can qualify. So new kitchen cabinets. Kitchens are a great project for this program because we really don't scrutinize kitchens in terms of like, ooh, is that historically appropriate? As long as you're not changing like window openings, it's not really going to matter. I always say, like, unless, George Washington ate in your kitchen, we probably don't care what you're going to do to it. And kitchens are a very expensive item to do. So it really helps to get that 20%. But other things, hot water heaters, putting in plumbing fixtures, insulating your house, doing other things to weatherproof it, all that type of stuff can qualify, like I said, on the interior and exterior. I mentioned solar panels. As long as they're installed in a way that's minimally visible from the street, usually we can allow that. A lot of times, unfortunately, if you have like a roof that slopes forward on the south side of your house and that's the most ideal place to put the panels, it's not going to work for this program. But if you put them elsewhere on your property, you can even put them on your garage. As long as they're, tied into your home, then that can qualify for the program. And people will take advantage of both the tax credit and other incentive programs when it comes to solar panels. There's no rule saying you can't do both. So that can be a great incentive. The type of work that doesn't qualify is anything that's outside the footprint of the home. So you can't do landscaping, driveways, fences, stuff like that. You can't do anything that adds to the square footage of your home. So you can't put on an addition or a deck. If you do have an existing piece of the house, you can do work on it. You can't claim work that wasn't approved ahead of time. So unfortunately, this isn't a retroactive program. So if you call me and say, oh, I just had to put on a new roof last year, it's not going to be something that we can approve for this, unfortunately. But if you realize you have work to do, get in touch with us right away. And as long as you've been in touch with us, we can, figure something out to get that going for you so we don't hold up your work. And then appliances also don't qualify, like removable appliances like refrigerators and stoves. But anything that's permanently installed, like a hot water heater, you're not going to take your hot water heater with you and move. So those qualify. And then work that doesn't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. So I don't know how much you all have talked about that locally, but these are the preservation standards that we use to sort of guide what we deem appropriate for this program. The biggest takeaways from that are, repairing things rather than replacing them. If they need to be replaced, replacing them in kind with the same material, or if they can't be the same material, an appropriate substitute material. So it's really about like retaining that historic fabric and historic character as best as you can. And there is still flexibility within those standards to get work done. And it's a house, you have to live in it. So we understand that there's things that need to be upgraded. I just explained the slide without even looking at it. See? So that's basically exactly what I was just saying. Retain, repair, replace appropriately. The biggest thing is with windows. We don't stop people from replacing their windows. If I could convince every person throughout the state to fix their own windows, I would. but I can't, and that's not practical. The the one rule is we generally don't approve vinyl windows under this program just because like the quality is just not there. They don't match appropriately to historic windows, but there are wood, aluminum clad wood, various composite materials, fiberglass that can be acceptable and totally appropriate to use in this program. I kind of already covered this, but we're not trying to make anybody go back in time. We're trying to, you know, keep these homes usable. It's not turning your house into a house museum. You don't have to go back to historical things. Although someone in our office did just restore her kitchen to look like a 1930s kitchen. It actually looks pretty great, but we don't expect everyone to do that. We know that, you know, this is a dynamic space that needs to be functional, and we allow for that within this program. So there are instances where if you have a two-family home, or maybe there's a business on the first floor of your house, you claim part of your home as an office, you can still use this credit. There's just a little bit more math involved, but the easiest example is if you have a two-family home and you want to use this homeowner credit, you can claim the cost of anything you do on the interior of your living unit. Anything that's on the exterior or in a shared space has to be basically divided up based on the percentage of the home that you live in. So if it's a pure 50-50 split, you put on a new roof, you can only claim 50% of the cost of the roof for your tax credit. And then you can't claim any of the costs of work done inside the rental unit because that's not your home. But there is still a way for people with multifamily, as long as they live in a part of it, to claim this credit. And it has to be owner-occupied residences. Technically, if you have a second home that is historic, as long as you don't rent it out, as long as it's like your house that you live in and nobody else, you don't make income from it, it can also work for that way. We have a lot of people up on like the Thousand Islands who have vacation homes up there that they do not rent out, and they use the credit for that. The COVID had one good impact on this program in that it really pushed us to get things digital. It used to be, because it was related to taxes, everything had to come in on paper. You had to have a original signature. By all means, if that's the way you are most comfortable, I will never stop accepting paper applications. I absolutely refuse to get rid of them because we have a lot of people who are just more comfortable with that, and that's okay. We still get, you know, the few dozen paper applications, I would say a month, but the whole entire application is available online right now. It goes through DocuSign. It allows you to just type in all of your information, your work. You can even submit payment information online, and it just gets to us more quickly. It reduces the amount of paper, and it has streamlined the process a bit. So it's a fairly good process, I hope, and I surely will answer any questions anyone has as they're filling out their application online. I do that a lot as well. The nice thing too about the online application is people can upload their photos right there. There's no having to figure out a way to get photos to them. The most important part of the application is this worksheet where you explain the work that you're going to do. We can't go to everybody's house who's doing the credit and see what it looks like now and what it looks like after. So we rely on you to explain what it is that you're doing. It's really important to tell us like what's the material of the thing now. So you have a worn out asphalt shingle roof. You want to put on a new asphalt shingle roof. That's great. That gives me the information that I need along with the photos to make sure that, yeah, that's totally appropriate. So, you know, explaining all this, it's good. Also, I'd like to tell a lot of people, I don't know how to incorporate this into our written instructions, but it's not the end of the world if your application is not perfect. If there's something that we need more information about, literally, I will call you on the phone, or I will send you an email to whatever email address you've indicated, just saying, hey, I see that you're going to put in some insulation. I need a little bit more information about exactly what kind of insulation that's going to be. So we're not the type of, I know we're a state agency and this is an official form, but we're not just going to stamp it denied and make you do it again. We'll work with you to get things moving along. Our goal is to get these approved and have people move forward with their work. Typically the application, it's, if you read our guidance, it says it can take up to 30 days to review. Honestly, it doesn't usually take more than about 2 weeks at most. I had somebody the other day who just submitted their application and they said, oh, my contractor wants to be able to start next week. Are you going to be able to approve it? And I just went in really quickly and I gave it a scan. And I said, you know what? Everything looks to be in order. I have a few ahead of it that I need to get to, so I can't run the paperwork through, but you go ahead and start because we know how hard it is for people to get contractors lined up. So we're very flexible. I know it's, the rules say these things, but we'll work with you as best as we can. So like I said, your application's approved, you do your work, you want to keep track of however much you're spending, because at the end, you're going to have to tell us what your expenses were. You don't need to submit anything to us like canceled checks or invoices. You should keep all of that for your records in case there's any question from tax and finance when you claim the credit. But we will believe you if you tell us what you spent. We're going to believe that that's true. There's some litigious language on your application about, you promise that you're telling us the truth. We need estimates when you're putting in the part 1 and 2 to know approximately how much the work's going to cost. If you don't have an estimate from a contractor, it's okay. If you think, I think my roof's going to cost $20,000, put that on your application. If it ends up that it costs $26,000, that's fine, as long as those numbers at the end are true and correct. I'm getting ahead of myself, but so, you've done your work, you fill out your part 3, you include your photos of your completed work. And then as long as you get that form to us by absolute latest December 31st, we can issue a certificate of completion for that same year so that you would claim it on that year's tax return. If they come to us after the 31st, we can't really do anything about that because then you're into the following tax year. You don't lose out on the credit that you've accumulated, but you just would have to wait until 2025 to claim the credit. So sometimes people have their projects span over several years. Sometimes people close one out at the end of one calendar year. It just depends on how long you want to wait to take the credit. If you want a larger credit eventually. So that's up to you. The things that would cause us to not approve an application, if it just doesn't meet the qualifications for some reason, if it's not, a listed property, work that's already been done, work that really just doesn't meet the standards. So we would hate to see someone try to apply for the credit and ask to do something like this to the porch, because that's really, I think it's pretty clear you're not retaining that character. You're definitely not replacing it in kind in this situation. So those are the types of things that we can approve. We don't often end up having to deny things, but sometimes, people, they said they were going to do one thing and then they changed their mind, or they did work that they would never approve. So if you're ever worried that it's something we wouldn't approve, just reach out. We're all very easily available. I'm the person who covers Oneonta, so you know where to find me. And that is, perfect segue to, that is my information. I'm also going to, I can get them from the sticky notes that I made earlier. I'm just going to pop that information into the chat if anyone needs to copy it, my email address. And all of the forms and everything are available on our website, or the tax credit website. Hopefully we'll be updating soon. It's a little information heavy right now, with a little bit confusing, I think, but we're going to be updating that soon. But all the information on there is accurate. So I don't know if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask me.
Well, I have several questions. But I did want to just let everyone know that I am going to pop some links into the chat as well, that are going to link to our City Commission's website, and some additional documents, the historic resource survey that we recently had done for the city of Oneonta, and also the current local like CLG ordinance. So everyone has access to that too. So keep an eye on the chat for those. But yeah, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask now because I have a list.
Oh, wait, I did forget to mention, outbuildings are not covered by this program. So detached garages are not covered. I think that's stupid. Personally, I'm not, oh, we shouldn't have said that on the recorded thing. Unfortunately, like, but sometimes you have a house where the garage was built at the same time the house, it very clearly matches. Unfortunately, according to tax and finance, if the garage is not physically attached to your dwelling, then it counts as an outbuilding. It doesn't qualify. However, if you do have a carriage house or a barn on your property, there is a separate barn rehabilitation tax credit. Those properties actually don't even have to be listed. If it's a barn and it was built in 1946 or before, it doesn't even have to be on the National Register, the state register. And that program is a 25% credit, and that is retroactive. So if you do have a crusty old barn and you've done some work on it in the last 5 years, you could potentially get that credit. There's a different person on our office that handles those. Her name is Olivia Brzee, and I'm going to type her information into the chat right now because she handles all of the barn credit applications and can answer any questions anyone has about that.
That was one of my questions that I was going to ask about. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Christina.
There's also a commercial tax credit. I know that wasn't really the part of purpose of this presentation. I used to do those, so I can give you like the quick and dirty information about those. The commercial tax credit, there's both a federal and a New York State commercial tax credit available. Those are for income producing properties. The state credit, you have to be also in a qualifying census tract. So sometimes people only qualify for the federal credit. Excuse me. If you're in a qualifying census tract, you can also get the state credit. The federal credit's 20%. The state credit is 20 or up to 30% if your total project cost is under $2.5 million. So there's potentially a lot of credits available. Again, that's a lot of people advocate for, like, commercial historic districts of, like, downtowns and areas like that, so that those businesses can get the commercial tax credit. The biggest difference between the commercial program and the homeowner one, other than the federal angle, is that the commercial credits, it's really meant for large rehabilitation projects. Like our homeowners, you got to only spend $5,000. The commercial credit program is meant for big rehabilitation projects where there's this complicated equation where you factor in whatever you paid for the property, you take out the value of the land, you factor in depreciation and capital improvements, and whatever number you get to, it's called the adjusted basis, and you have to spend at least that much money on the rehabilitation work to even qualify for that program. So, if you have a small rental building and you're just putting on a new roof, maybe if you're putting on a new slate roof and you've owned the building for a really long time, you just might qualify. But it's worth reaching out to our office to talk to someone about how you might qualify for that program as well.
So Christina, it looks like we do have a couple questions in the chat. Hillary says, thank you. This is very helpful. We're looking to replace a stone patio that's crumbling. It's essentially attached to the back of our house. Would this be a good example of a project that could qualify?
If it's if the patio is like, I'd have to see it to say, but I'm envisioning like if the patio is like attached to the back of your house and the door walks out onto it and there are steps that go down and it's not just like pavers on the ground, then yes, if it's raised up, it might be able to be considered like part of the structure and the footprint. It's hard to say without seeing it. I don't want to make you share a photo of this thing, but it's possible. You can email me a picture of it and then I'll tell you for sure.
Awesome. And then Bill, who is the chair of the Landmarks and Historic Preservation Commission, noted that our commission, in our review for local landmarks, we really only look at the exterior of buildings. And so he's asking, does that mean that tax credits are also limited to exteriors?
This is a great question because it brings up something that I didn't mention because Oneonta is a certified local government now. So this tax credit is a tax law. It's not our historic preservation program. Technically, it's tax and finance program that they've brought us in to be the gatekeepers of what is historically appropriate, I guess, and what qualifies. So ultimately, there are two entities that can provide those preliminary approvals of like reviewing the work before it starts, either the state historic preservation office or a local certified local government. But because the local reviews only consider exterior work, you would only be able to approve exterior work. So hypothetically, like I had this, I think, happen in Rochester where someone replaced their roof and they called me and they're like, oh, I put my roof on, but it was like 3 years ago. And I'm like, are you in one of the local districts? And they said, yes. I'm like, did you have to go and get their approval? And they said, yes. And I'm like, well, then technically that's that's approval before the start of work. So you're in. So, the other thing about paint too is that I don't know what your all stance is on paint, but I have no authority to tell anyone what color they can paint their house. So if someone comes in for the tax credit and they want to paint their house pink, I can say, great, the wood's going to be protected by that new coat of paint, and I will not tell them what they can and can't do. But if you're asking about local approvals, can only cover exterior work. But our approval, it doesn't limit it. So if someone comes before your board, gets that local approval, you might want to say like, hey, wink, wink, you should also apply for this historic tax credit. You don't even have to wink. It's not anything sketchy. It's actually totally legitimate.
So that brings up a question for me, Christina. Actually, I have two kind of related questions. So right now in the city of Oneonta, our commission has proposed a handful of local landmarks, and they are all either listed on or eligible for inclusion on the state and national registers. So my question is, if, for example, we had a property that was a local landmark but was not listed on the national register, does that mean it's ineligible for tax credits?
Correct.
Okay.
It has to be listed on the state or national register unless it is a certified local district. So there is, I think it's the Sedgwick Highland James Certified Historic District in Syracuse. Or no, I don't know. I can't remember now. Syracuse and Rochester. I do too many of them, but I think it's in Syracuse. It's not National Register listed, but there's a process by which the National Park Service will certify a local district. So it may be one that you've locally designated and then you run it up the food chain and you get their blessing. It's not quite the same level of documentation as getting it listed on the National Register, but they can at least certify it so then you can become eligible for the tax credit. But otherwise, the threshold is at the very least it has to be listed on the state register.
Okay. So again, just to clarify, eligible properties. Okay. Perfect. So it's a good reason to, if you have an eligible property that isn't on the register, to just, finish that up.
And so if you are an individual and your home is like it's individually eligible, not part of a district, and you're considering like, oh, I don't really care about getting this listed. You have a lot of work to do. It might be worth pursuing that listing because if you get your house individually listed on the state register, then you are eligible to use these credits, be qualified for the program.
Awesome. So Helen is asking for clarification about the solar panels case. She said in most cases, solar panels would not be conforming to historic standards as they're seen from the street, which is our criteria. So this kind of goes back to our local legislation, which essentially is that if it is visible from a public right-of-way in a locally landmarked district or as an individual local landmark, it is subject to Historic Preservation Commission review. So could you speak a little bit more about like how you engage in that review process when it comes to something that will be maybe altering the exterior of a historic property in this way?
In this way. So I have no business telling anyone what to do about their solar panels unless they apply for this credit. So that's the other thing to remember is that like I've told you all of these things, but you only have to listen to me if you're sending an application to me. Otherwise, I have no business telling anyone what to do with their home. Um, we don't have like, I guess we have like very general guidance on solar panels, and we kind of defer to like the Park Service has guidance on it too. It just shouldn't be visible from the public right of way. So if that's something that you all would not approve, then probably we wouldn't approve it either. So, but like I said, even if your garage is detached from your house, you can put solar panels on your garage. It's tied into the systems of your home. So that works, that would qualify. You can, if you have a huge property, you want to put some little arrays out in your yard, go for it. That still qualifies. But not slapping them on the front of your house. We would just say like, this doesn't qualify. And honestly, in some cases, like if that was part of a larger project, like, oh, you were doing some interior work and you were, painting your house and you're going to put solar panels right on the front of it. Sometimes we have to make a judgment call where like, does this sink the whole ship? And there's certain things like putting vinyl siding all over your house, maybe ripping out wood windows and putting in all vinyl windows that aren't appropriate. There's some things where like it just tips the scales in the wrong direction, and solar panels on the front of the house would be one of those things.
Awesome. Just as an example, I have a neighbor who recently installed solar panels, and you cannot see them. They are like really like flush to the roof and is kind of tucked around back. They aren't listed though, so they couldn't apply for tax credits.
I see a question about the city and taxes. So this is a New York State income tax credit. It has nothing to do with property taxes, county taxes. It has nothing, the city is not impacted in any way by people receiving this credit coming out of New York State's pocket. And I've never been aware that any municipality would ever be punished because their residents are overusing the credit. And actually, I was just having a conversation with someone at work today. Some states have programs where there's like a finite amount of money available from the state in credits, and it's like a first come, first served thing. That is not the case here. There is no limit. It's not like, oh, only 700 people a year can get the credit. There's no, the cap is no more than $50,000 per taxpayer in a single tax year, but there is right now no cap. So it's a really great program to be able to take advantage of. And who wants to pay taxes more taxes?
So just to clarify, it's an income tax, based.
No income tax that is being reduced by this credit.
So it is not in any way diminishing the amount of property tax that a homeowner would owe to their municipality.
That's completely separate. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
And there's also, I mean, unless your tax assessor decides to show up 2 days after you finish all your work, we have no relationship with assessment in this program. So like, we're not flipping the tax assessor data saying you should go check out all these houses because they just don't have tax credit. There's no, that has nothing to do with that either on our end.
I was curious too. So what if a homeowner does the work as opposed to hiring it out? Does that impact anything?
I wasn't reading my slides closely enough. So that's one thing that you can't, that's one thing that's not eligible is the cost of the work if you do it yourself, unfortunately, because there is no way to like quantify for tax purposes the value of your own labor. But if you are doing the work yourself, if you're painting your house, you can claim the cost of the primer, you can claim the cost of the paint. You can't claim the cost of like the rollers and brushes and tools and things like that. But any of the materials, lumber, flooring, any cabinets you're installing, light fixtures, things like that. So I do have some people who are just like super handy and they're giving me like, okay, towel bar, light fixtures, sconces, things like that, that stuff adds up. There's with old houses, there's always something to do.
I have another question. So when you had that image of the house with the beautiful columns that were then removed and replaced, We were actually having a conversation about this. Our commission did a walking tour of one of our National Register listed districts, and we were looking at some of these beautiful columns that houses have. And so one of the things that came up in conversation was, so what happens if someone replaces or repairs these columns, but uses a different building material? So if they use a composite or a plastic or something like that to replace original wood or plaster columns, but they appear to be, for all purposes, identical. How does that work?
So that's a great question because the Park Service just issued updated guidance on the use of replacement materials. Because we've had this come up before with, columns. It used to be like, oh yeah, fiberglass was okay, but if it was like up high on a cornice, now they're starting to consider everything. So I can't say like blanket statement, like, yes, this is always okay. No, it's not. It really has to do with like what the material was before. Why is it being replaced? Are they wood columns that have to be replaced because they're rotted and they're just going to continually rot because that's the nature of wood? And now you've been able to find fiberglass columns that can be painted, and for all appearances, no one would ever know the difference. We're, we're starting to realize like there has to be some more flexibility. There's the guidance is really good because it has you take into account many different things, like what is that original material, what's the longevity if you were to replace it in kind versus a composite material or a more modern material. So it's possible that that could be okay.
Awesome. Any other questions or thoughts? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christina. We have your contact info, so we can all get in touch with you if we have any questions. But also just kind of to reiterate what Christina said, I think a lot of times people think about, SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, as like a state agency, and it's this monolith, and if you call, you won't get to a person. And that has not been my experience in any case. Everyone that I've encountered has been really helpful and eager to work with folks who are working on these projects and applying for things. So thank you for coming and for sharing with us.
If I personally hate having to listen to voicemails, that's probably my mom's fault. But if my phone rings, I will answer it and talk to you. And I like, I'm pretty chatty. So I'll talk, like I'm happy to talk to people on the phone. Like on Monday, I literally like air traffic control guided this person through like submitting their application because they were a little confused on what, and he was like, thank you so much for taking the time. And I thought, I'm literally being paid to do this. This is my job. So you are not putting me out by asking me questions. I'm happy to, even if people are saying like, I'm not sure if this would qualify, shoot me an email. Like if you want to, I have somebody with some funky roof tiles in Rochester and they're like, would this be okay if we use these instead? So that's the type of things where it's okay. I'm happy to answer those questions. And, like I said, we're reachable, we're flexible. We understand people need to live in these homes and we want to help make them livable.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, for arranging this and accommodating my weird schedule.
We appreciate it, and we're glad it worked out. And like I said, we're recorded. So I will download this and share it out, and we can get all the folks who weren't able to make it all of the good information. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.